Welcome to Better Health Guy Blogcasts, empowering your better health. And now, here's Scott, your Better Health Guy. The content of this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Nothing in today's discussion is meant to serve as medical advice or as information to facilitate self-treatment. As always, please discuss any potential health-related decisions with your own personal medical authority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 69 of the Better Health Guy blogcast series. Today's guests are Aaron and Geneva Bigelow, and the topic of the show is AmpCoil. When Aaron and Geneva Bigelow started their healing journey 12 years ago, they believed Lyme disease was going to be part of their lives forever. Having both worked for many years in the biotech industry, they'd tried biofeedback, PEMF, and bioresonance technology, but weren't getting sustainable results. They eventually found a solution that eliminated the devastating effects of Lyme disease, and that was when the AmpCoil was born. They used an early prototype to help their family get their lives back, but knew deeply that their mission was much greater than their own family's wellness because so many people were suffering. There were moments when Aaron couldn't get out of bed, then he'd hear of the next great thing, feel better for a short time, but soon relapse again. One of those things was high-grade ozone therapy. Traveling to Tijuana, Mexico every day for months, he witnessed people in the waiting room close to death and hundreds of people crossing the border seeking hope on their own journey to wellness. In that moment, Aaron began to feel gratitude for his journey, knowing it must lead to a greater story. He kept his hope alive this way. During Aaron's health crisis, Geneva developed left-sided paralysis and migraines, also due to Lyme and co-infections, and was pregnant with their second daughter. Neither of them could work. The turning point came when they hit bottom. Geneva was 9 months pregnant and standing in the welfare line waiting for food stamps. Then they were to spend the night at a homeless shelter. At this point, they spent over $200,000 on treatments and accrued $100,000 in unpaid medical bills. They were also watching their eldest daughter have regular seizures as she too battled with Lyme. Aaron remembers thinking, "You may be able to take one of us, but you won't take our daughter." They needed a miracle. Today, they're symptom-free. As the founders of AmpCoil, life is eventful. Every day is about learning how to do better. The Bigelows, along with the entire AmpCoil team, credit their success so far to their own journey to wellness using the technology. Many members of the team use the AmpCoil device to get on the other side of Lyme, severe autoimmune conditions, and other illnesses, and today they are passionate about sharing their stories. Aaron says it's always the deep transformations that we needed to go through that propel us forward in life, and often something profound is born out of those experiences. In this case, it was the AmpCoil. And now my interview with Aaron and Geneva Bigelow. So I have always been a fan of frequency, light, sound, and similar therapies, and I'm really excited to have Aaron and Geneva Bigelow on the show today to talk to us about the AmpCoil and their own personal journey through Lyme disease and all that comes with it. So welcome to the show, Aaron and Geneva.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's great being here.
It is an honor. Thank you.
So, like many of us, your family has had quite a difficult journey. So, talk to us about how your own family's health led you to looking for solutions in the realm of Lyme disease, and then how that journey eventually led you to the AmpCoil.
Okay, I'll start. And I've learned over the years to call it a health opportunity as opposed to a challenge. And that is part of what has helped us as our family moving forward. And I can honestly say, if we hadn't gone on the journey that we had over the last 15 years now, we wouldn't be sitting here today having this conversation. So, sometimes out of crisis, they say, comes a beautiful opportunity. And, for us, the beautiful opportunity was to give back and help people feel like there was light at the end of the tunnel. And so, that's really what we're committed to. And, really started, been in the bioenergetic health business for a couple decades now on an executive level with other companies. And so I'd seen all the pieces that could potentially help people shift their vibration, so to speak. And what I realized was that traveling the world and I think I stopped counting at about $350,000 in our health journey, that there were lots of great technologies out there, lots of great things that could work in the right environment. Yet it didn't seem like all the pieces were really put into one place that somebody could easily use and know that they had a pretty high percentage of having some success. And so that's one of the biggest things we got to learn. And because we were in this business, we had a lot of great resources, a lot of incredible people that saw the vision of what we could do. And, I'm one of those people, my whole family, we literally, when we had attempted all the different things that you're exposed to in this country for help for chronic autoimmune Lyme-related stuff, we realized that literally living off the grid was our next thing that we could possibly do. And we were literally days away from being homeless. We'd actually even looked at a homeless shelter because our family had pretty much gotten to a point where they said, well, why don't you just give us a call when that Lyme disease thing is no longer around? And we know we're not alone in that. And fortunately, we somehow stuck together.
Yeah.
And we had two beautiful children.
Yeah.
And our oldest daughter was heavily infected by it. And we ended up getting a donation from a friend of my father that gave us what we needed to move to a holistic healing retreat in Costa Rica. We did everything we could to almost unplug for a year. And that really helped us on the spiritual side, on, cleaning out our body. But we realized that there was still more to it. There was still an underlying thing that hadn't been dealt with. But that was just another big piece in our journey that led us to realize how to put all these pieces together. And that was kind of the final straw. Was our daughter got to a point where she was going into convulsions, seizures, eyes rolling in the back of her head, turning gray. And we were basically told that we needed to get to a facility that could keep her alive. It was that close. And both her and I had what they call such bad strands of Lyme that it almost took our lives multiple times. And so,
and our story is actually probably very similar to a lot of people who are dealing with chronic conditions. Where you start off and you try these lifestyle changes, and you try and go gluten-free and dairy-free and sugar-free, corn-free, all the dietary changes, you limit your Wi-Fi, you try and reduce your stress, you eventually stop being able to work and then you start going broke trying to get well because you've purchased foot baths and saunas and tried this protocol and paid for this special treatment and went to this clinic and, that process. I mean, it's really a similar journey that we thought we were alone in it. But as we have over the years talked to so many people, it's the same story. Maybe some of the details are different, but the experience along the way is very, very similar. And so that's,
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing for us is we were fortunate enough to have a lot of great people in our lives that understood this well enough. And we'd had such a great bond with from previous companies and previous relationships that when we understood how we could potentially put together what's known as a modified Tesla coil, and that we understood what an amplifier could do to be able to go intercellular, to be able to pass the blood.
Really, in the beginning, our underlying prayer was that we could find something that would help our family get better, and that something would also bless all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's clear that you guys are definitely doing that. I've talked to lots of people that are using the AMP coil. I'm excited to start my journey with the AMP coil as well. And so I think it's great that your personal experience has really helped a number of people. Let's talk a little bit about frequency and vibration. So what is frequency for those that don't really understand it? How does it impact our biology? How does it potentially help to shift our terrain to support health and balance in the body?
Well, it really comes, the foundation of it all is really understanding that everything is frequency. All matter is vibrating. And even when you look at the word frequency, it's simply a waveform, and frequency is how frequent that waveform is rising and falling. So if you have a high frequency, it means that the waveform is rising and falling frequently. And if you have a low frequency, it's rising and falling slowly and in a slower pace. And so everything around us, from the chair that we're sitting on to a plant to the food that we eat, it's all matter that is vibrating at a very specific frequency. And these frequencies can be measured. There's frequency measurement tools. You can look at the molecular weight of items and pass it through a physics formula and identify the frequency. And so how that relates to our biology is, if everything is frequency, our body is frequency as well. And it's literally different vibrations of frequency. So our liver may be resonating at one frequency and our lungs at another, and a mineral at a different frequency, a pathogen at a different frequency that may be in our system. And so we're literally a concert of tones vibrating from our system, all at different things. And so each one of these has an optimal frequency. Our liver has an optimal frequency, and that's what we call resonance. When we are operating in our optimal frequency, we're in resonance.
And you mentioned the word tone, and I think you even refer to the AMP coil as essentially kind of like a music delivery system for the body, right? That's actually what it's doing, is delivering those tones and those frequencies to the body, similar to the body hearing pleasing music, essentially, right?
Right, because sound is frequency.
Right.
Well, yeah, and just to kind of put it in perspective really quick.
Sure.
And I didn't learn this until recently. We all have songs that we listen to that just make us feel like connected in our heart. And our heart is our most powerful frequency transmitter. And one of the things I learned recently is that virtually every love song ever recorded was recorded at roughly 432 hertz, which is this vibrational match that allows people to feel at peace inside. And that's literally where we harmonize the technology at, is at that love vibration, without getting too out there. But this is something that we've all had an experience around of what a song makes us feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the experience with the AMP coil is a little different. It's not all audible tones. There's only a frequency range, typically through the coil, within a couple hundred hertz range, and we have almost 10,000 hertz range. So it's not all audible tones, but they are sent through frequency through a Tesla coil that allows the body to receive the benefits, both audible and inaudible.
So would you say that the frequency that the body's hearing or receiving from the AMP coil, is that helping the body to reduce certain stressors that it may be dealing with? Or is it helping to raise the vibration and support the body on a frequency level? Or is it a combination of both of those things?
A combination of both, okay. Definitely, because there are certain frequencies that may be that are a biological match for the body, like an organ frequency, a nutrient frequency, a brainwave frequency. And so when we send a resonant frequency, meaning the optimal frequency for that biological function, that is going to create, just like a tuning fork, when you strike a tuning fork and then you use a tuning fork in the same key, it's going to start vibrating at that same pitch, right? That same tone. And that's the same thing that we do, where our body is vibrating, and then we bring the coil excuse me, the coil to our body, and it literally becomes like a human tuning fork, because our body goes, oh, that's the liver frequency, I'm responding to liver, and it starts to match that. And so that's when we talk about raising our vibration, is when we are in optimal pitch. Now, the other part that you mentioned is when there is interference. And when there's interference, for example, non-beneficial microbes, metals, toxins, all of those are not within our biological divine design. And so those create an interference which lowers our vibration because it interferes with our optimal pitch.
So how can frequency potentially have an edge over, let's say, taking things orally in terms of getting inside the cells, getting to things where the blood doesn't necessarily travel? How is frequency potentially more advantageous in that scenario?
The main component that provides that benefit is actually the magnetic field. So the magnetic field through this modified Tesla coil is what allows for permeability all the way. There's about, when you use a meter to measure it with the amp coil, it's about 8 feet in every direction of the body. When you place the coil on your body, you can see with the meter that it's actually recognizing the magnetic field all the way through the body. And so because of that, that magnetic field is permeating directly into the cells. And with a lot of situations nowadays with pathogens, especially Lyme, metals, things like that, they can go intracellular. So if you're working within the bloodstream, it's not necessarily going intracellular where the root, where the core issue is. And that's the key. And oftentimes too, when you're working with pathogens, if you're only working within the bloodstream, they perceive that as an adverse environment if you have antibiotics or things like that. So they're going to want to protect themselves. And so what pathogens will do is avoid the bloodstream. So they'll cross the blood-brain barrier. And now you have significant neurological issues, or they may burrow deep into the joints. And now you have inflammation and all this pain, or deep into the hollow organs to try and avoid this adverse environment. So that's, people will receive some benefit from, bloodstream types of herbs, antibiotics, things like that. But if you really want to get to the core issue, you have to have something that goes anywhere and everywhere in the body.
I had the opportunity recently to come up and visit you guys at your facility there in Nevada City. And one of the demos that was just kind of fun to see was the one that Dr. Deborah Drake did, showing the meter on her back and the Tesla coil on her front. And as soon as it started delivering those frequencies, you could actually sense that through the entire body, which was pretty cool. I mean, pretty simple, but it's kind of cool to be able to see that actually happening.
Yeah.
So what are some of the conditions that people have reported back to you that they've seen improvement with? So we know you talk about Lyme. What about things like chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia? Are there other conditions that are microbe and toxicity based where people also are seeing benefits from using something like the amp?
Yeah, so I want to jump into this first, and then maybe you go ahead. An analogy that I give that most people can relate to is a fish tank. So as most of us have either owned a fish tank or have been close to one and realized that the pH has to be at a certain level in the tank for everything to be at its highest vibration. The fish look healthy, there's no fungus building in the tank, and when that's going on, all the things that we're talking about now have no ability to exist in that environment. So virtually what the device can assist in over time is so many of us that get these health issues that you're mentioning end up with a heavy fungus load. And it's usually an extremely difficult thing to get on the positive side of. So because of the power and the precision of this, and because of how it's assisting in the immune system, you're getting to that healthy alkaline state where these things just no longer have a home. Mm-hmm. So it really gets it back to that point where all the things you're mentioning are just not part of a conversation in your body anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to recap what Aaron's saying, we're basically working with bioterrain correction. So you have oxidation, minerals, and pH, like Aaron is talking about. And when you see in a fish tank When any one of those three goes off, what's the first thing you start to see? You start to see fungus building up on the fish tank. Well, that's the first thing that you start to see in the body as well, because we are, over 80% water. We're literally like a salty bag, just like a fish tank. And so the first thing that you start to see when your pH goes a little bit off, you start to see fungus. And then what do you see when it goes a little bit off more? You start to see parasites. Just like in a fish tank, if you've ever let a fish tank get really dirty, you see the fungus, and then you see little worms starting to float around in the water. Where did those worms come from? Nobody dropped them in there. They just literally appeared out of this imbalanced bioterrain. And that's the same type of thing that happens in our body. So really the focus of the AMP coil and the aim of the whole program is not disease specific. It's addressing the core imbalance of bioterrain that allow the disease to exist in the first place. And so the real focus is focusing on balancing the organs and the nutrients, and then correcting the interference, what we call the bioterrain busters, that typically bring that bioterrain out of balance, which are primarily non-beneficial microbes, metals, and toxins.
And one of the things that I think people will probably ask is, how is the AMP coil different from Rife devices? And one of the things that I've always had some hesitation with some of the Rife devices that are out there. I've had several of them over my many years of recovering from Lyme, but it seemed that the focus was often on killing microbes and not so much what you're talking about, which is how do we shift the terrain so that the microbes don't have a place to stay. Right. And then the other challenge with some of the other frequency devices is it's almost like a slot machine in terms of trying to guess the frequency that might be beneficial to your body, right? And if you can't walk the next day, you hit the jackpot and something happened, and oftentimes you don't really feel much of anything. So how is the AMP coil different from a Rife device? And then how are the frequencies that are delivered to the body personalized in the AMP coil scenario?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very, very grateful for Rife devices. It was a big part of our journey, which helped us to really see what was possible. Okay, because we definitely started to get results with Rife. Some of the challenge was exactly like you said. It's this kind of killing process that can be never ending. Because if your bioterrain isn't in balance, you could be focusing on this parasite for these 2 weeks, and this fungus for the next 2 weeks, and this co-infection for the next 2 weeks. And after 6 months of doing this, you turn around and now the fungus is back and the parasites are back. And so it's literally this ongoing process.
Some people call it that game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
You're trying to pop up it. Yeah.
So that's one thing that we started to experience. And so we scratched our heads saying there's got to be another way to shift things globally that just don't allow for this environment to happen in the first place. So that's really what when you work with the AMP coil, the first 30 days is primarily about just bioterrain correction. And then after that, whatever you're feeling is left over, you can go in and start specifically working with something. Maybe you have a blood work that shows some type of pathogen and you want to work with that directly. And, you're welcome to work specific after that. And then the other part that we experienced is we even experienced this when we first, worked with the AMP coil before we had the software fully developed. Was the frequencies are only as good as knowing which frequencies to use. Otherwise it's kind of like shooting blank shots.
Yeah, and we came from the biofeedback industry, so we understood that the body was intelligent enough to really say what it needs, as long as you understood how to ask the right questions.
Right.
So, and we understood that majority of these, we'll just call them low-level critters, they vibrate at a certain level. So we knew that we could find a match of what that level was, because everything vibrates at a certain frequency. And so that was one of the things that was tested within the biofeedback system that we helped develop.
Yes, the question was, well, first we were familiar with galvanic skin responses biofeedback. And then we said, well, there's been a lot of development since then. Let's go beyond that. We started looking at neurofeedback, which is fabulous, but typically the accessories, are about $1,500. And our whole goal was to keep the AMP coil at a price point that was affordable to home users. most people are already in a financially devastated situation. And so our goal was to say, let's keep it bottom line as much as possible. So then a dear friend of ours had been working for over a decade on developing voice analysis and had been able to get it into an app form. And we went, wow, this has incredible potential. We started seeing how it's being used in law enforcement systems with lie detector tests, and because it's so finely tuned what the voice can reveal about the body. And we said, well, gosh, if it's literally like a truth detector or a lie detector, let's see how we could apply that to the human body. And that's what we did. And it's very simple because the vagus nerve is connected to every organ system in the body. And so when we speak, what we're doing when we're capturing a voice print in the app is we're looking at on a voice spectrum where the highs are, where the lows are, literally the cracks and the spikes, the pitches and the flats are in the voice. And those are specific frequencies that are then tied to specific forms of matter. And so yeah.
I think when I learned about that with the amp coil, I think that was one of the things that got me the most excited. I had some experience in the past with a system that used a similar technology to help figure out the emotional traumas and conflicts that the body is dealing with. I'm probably familiar with that system. And so being able to take that idea and figure out, ask the body first, what do you want? And then deliver those things rather than, okay, let's dial something in and kind of see what happens, which, as you said, in some cases can be helpful. But I like that idea. I like energetic medicine. I've always been a fan. In fact, energetic testing systems were really what got me back to a good place. And so seeing those things built into the amp coil is something that really resonated with me personally.
Yeah. And this really stands out to us and to a lot of our users because I know a lot of people, including ourselves, had gone through a battery of tests and the tests show up fine. And you go, well, but I'm not feeling fine. There's something else. And that's where it's the beauty is our bodies have that innate wisdom and it holds all the information that we need. We just need a way to give our body a voice to express itself, to say, what do I need? What is true to you and what is not true? And that's what the voice analysis does.
So with the amp coil, you've taken a number of different things. You've taken the biofeedback piece, you've taken bioresonance, you've taken PEMF or pulsed electromagnetic fields, and you've put all of those things, including the sound and vibration and frequency, all into one device. So tell us what that means to take all of those things and put them into one device and how that then creates the amp coil that you have today.
Yeah, well, I think that what you had just mentioned with being able to penetrate deep into the body, and I mentioned that the magnetic field, so the connection between the PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency field, and the frequencies is that the magnetic field becomes a carrier for the frequencies. So there are PEMF devices out there, and they're beneficial, okay? But when you take PEMF, and then you use that to carry frequencies over it so that you can have those frequencies penetrate deep into the cells and then use biofeedback to know that you're using the right frequencies. That's really where the magic happens.
So the PEMF is really the carrier for the frequencies or the information that the body needs to be able to shift itself in a positive way.
Right.
Very cool. Yeah. So let's talk a little about the Tesla coil. So you have the coil that you put on the body. How does that deliver the frequencies to the body? Is that what's essentially creating this PEMF field that you're referring to?
Right. And just to clarify, it's a modified Tesla coil. Okay. So it's not exactly like the original, but it has very similar elements to it. It looks similar, but it's really creating a toroidal field versus a direct sine wave pulse like a lot of PEMF devices have, or Rife devices. It's creating a toroidal field. You can look it up online and actually view the field. It's quite a fascinating field. It's like a fountain that comes out of the field.
So you refer to the process of using the amp coil as cleanse, shift, and transform. Tell us what you mean by that process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to start with the cleansing part because, you know, we're so used to trying to build up our health, which we need to do. But I like to compare it to like pumping up a tire. You can pump up a tire all you want, but as long as you have a nail in the tire, you're going to have a slow leak. And so you know, we used to have counters full of thousands of dollars of supplements and all these things to try and boost our health, but we weren't getting to the source of where the leaks were. And that's why with the AMP coil, when you come in, you first start off, build up the body a little bit, because we typically come in a very depleted state. Okay. But then we quickly get into working within the cleansing journeys, the cleansing tones that help neutralize the interference of microbes, metals, and toxins, correct the bioterrain. And so that's that cleansing process. And in that cleanse, that's where the shift happens. Because now all of a sudden, what was perceived as static in the body, you know, maybe there's a parasite or mycobacteria or spirochetes or things like that. And if you imagine our body as a concert of tones, it's literally like hearing something in the background going, you know, it's like static in that concert of tones. And so by neutralizing that through bioresonance, we create a shift in the body, and in that shift comes a transformation. And everybody's transformation is a little bit different.
However, from a shift standpoint, one of the things that our clients tell us on a regular basis is that usually within the first one or two experiences, they start to feel a level of peace that maybe they haven't felt in years, because of how it's starting to calm the body down, start to reset the nervous system to the point where the neurotransmitters start to fire, and it's like the lights get turned back on. And so once that starts to happen, what all of a sudden becomes awakened? Hope. So all of a sudden, for the first time in sometimes years or decades, that person feels like, whoa, I can do this.
Mm-hmm. And when
so
people
starts getting that heavy lifting that maybe they haven't experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
When people are in that kind of sympathetic dominant mode where they're always in a fight or flight kind of state, I think that's completely the opposite of what we want from a healing perspective, right? And so we need to shift the body into a parasympathetic state. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about, right? That the AMP coil helps to kind of shift the nervous system more towards that rest, digest, and heal kind of state than always being in this sympathetic dominance.
Yeah, and again, everybody is different, but the other piece that comes into play with all this is a lot of us that experience this have huge issues with sleeping, or at least sleeping long periods of time. So once this starts to happen, in a lot of our cases, they're able to all of a sudden have the first good night's sleep they've had in a long time as well. And so that, again, gives them that another level of,
yeah. Once you get into that parasympathetic state, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because a lot of people don't realize all the different components that are needed to help the body heal. We just don't have that medical background. And so that is what has been built into the Better Guide app that powers the AMP coil, is this information. Like, for example, before you start a journey, which is a set of frequencies, typically lasts about 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour, there's a primer. And in that primer are central nervous system codes. Because you're right, we can't heal when we're in sympathetic mode. So the first step in that primer is relaxing the body, relaxing the nervous system, working with 432 hertz to ground the body, to earth grounding frequencies, to the Schumann wave, to mineralize the body so that communication can happen. A whole set. And so that's the built-in intelligence that's already programmed in there. All the user has to do is press play.
So it's interesting you mentioned the term mineralize, and you mentioned delivering nutrients earlier on as well. And so I think that's an interesting concept also, that sometimes the things we take that what the body really needed was the frequency of the thing that we took and not so much the actual substance. And I've seen this with other practitioners as well, where maybe they attempt to deliver certain nutrients or the frequencies of those nutrients with lasers, for example. And so tell us a little bit more when you say that this device potentially helps to support mineralizing the body. Does that mean that we're delivering a frequency of something like zinc or some other mineral?
It's a matching frequency, so there becomes an electron spin, so the body is able to better recognize it in when we ingest it through our food or when we do supplement. There are, most through our food, most of the time we're not going to get enough minerals in our body and in our water, things like that. So for the most part, people do continue to supplement with minerals, but minerals, digestive enzymes, fatty acids, and probiotics. That's kind of what we call the forever four that we're pretty much always going to need because we live in a toxic environment, our food is depleted, etc. But a lot of us go from having counters and thousands of dollars a month in supplements to just going back to the basic forever four. And once our body is able to recognize this in our system.
So you mentioned the term journey. So in the AMP Coil lingo, journey is, as I understand it, kind of like a playlist, so to speak, that it's a breakdown of the different frequencies or sound tones or vibrations that will be delivered as part of whatever that program is. So what are some of the journeys in the system that someone can select beyond the ones that are customized to them? And there are certain things that they can say, oh, I have this specific thing or this specific issue that I'd like support with. And then are there journeys that are delivered in the system that they can select?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. So the main difference between a journey and just a frequency set that you may Google and find online, say with Rife or Hulda Clark or in the CAFL directory, is those are just a set of frequencies. But a journey is going to take you through a whole process, like I mentioned, that built intelligence with a primer. Then it goes into typically some organ support and nutrient balance, and then may go into some cleansing tones, and then there's a closing at the end. And so, like, for example, in the closing, there's some immune stimulation because we know, whatever shifts are happening in the body, the immune system needs to be active to come and clean it up, right? Again, this is the average user is not going to know these things. And so we have it built into the background behind that play button. So there's cleansing journeys, there's organ journeys, nutrient journeys, and then we have what we call custom journeys. And these custom journeys are just really by popular request what people ask for. They're kind of symptom reduction that people like to do in between cleanses. For example, we've got, like Erin mentioned, there's deep sleep, which has primarily the neurofeedback, the brain working with the brainwave frequencies to get it out of the beta frequencies and down into the delta ranges so that the mind can calm and fall asleep. We've got Relaxol, which works primarily with the nervous system to when people are feeling anxious, just to feel calm and grounded. What else is there? We've got...
Tell us about the Herx Helper.
Oh, the Herx Help. Yeah, that's a popular one.
For sure, one of my favorites. Yeah, well, basically the Herx Help is a way when the body is starting to release, we'll just call them release these bugs, they can get stuck. And this is just allowing for the body's natural ability to let it flow through the organs that they would normally get stuck in, the kidney, the liver, or some of the primary ones. And so it's just aiding in that process so you can continue on with your life when this is going on inside your body.
Yeah, a lot of nutrients are also in Herx Help. So people may not be aware of, like glutathione, acetylcholine, things like that help neutralize toxins. And so the frequencies of a lot of those nutrients are also built into that 17-minute Herx Help journey.
So let's talk a little about what a session actually feels like. Can you kind of walk us through the experience of using the AMP Coil from doing the voice analysis to what the session actually feels like when they're doing it?
Yeah, I'll start. So first off, the voice analysis process literally takes a minute. And once that part is done, then you can usually the first time or two, you're going through this with a practitioner or someone from our support line, so you can understand how to interpret the simple information that's on there.
You just speak into the tablet for 30 seconds.
And then you're literally given a menu from there, and based on the things that are the highest priority, usually closest to 100%, you know where you want to focus. And it becomes very intuitive after the first time or two with a little coaching of what to do. And so now you're 2 or 3 minutes into the process, and you can literally start the journey. And so you're going and pressing that button that it's guiding you to. And once that happens, let's just say Relaxol is a perfect example. Relaxol is helping, again, relax the nervous system. So especially for a lot of people that have a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, just things that keep them in kind of that hyperactive state, you're putting this on, and usually within a few minutes, just even by putting it on your chest, you're starting to feel that sense of calm, almost like a deep massage, or for people that meditate, that deep state of meditation. And a lot of people will fall asleep. And these are people like myself. I've probably taken a handful of naps my whole life on my own. I get on the Ampoule coil, put Relaxol on. Majority of the time, I'm going to be out cold in 5-10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then I wake up at the end of the session almost feeling like I just had a good night's sleep, but I was only out for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So, and it's an overwhelming sense of peace on the other end. Yeah. So it really feels like there's some realigning of the circuit boards starting to happen during that time.
Yeah, I remember when I first started coiling, and then I started sharing this with other people and found out a lot of other people were having this experience, especially when you go into the cleanse journeys, is I had ended up being left side paralyzed from Lyme and co-infections and all that. So when I started coiling, I was so amazed at the way that the magnetic field, as it ran through my body and brought those frequencies, I could literally feel where it was fighting these stuck points. And I could feel right where my migraines used to start, which was probably a source of infection. I could feel it pulsing. I could feel my nerves in my face, my eyes twitching right where I lost all nerve function. There would be maybe about a minute or two of achiness that I could feel down my left arm. That was the first sign of paralysis that I had.
This one's a little more sensitive, though. So not all of you are going to feel that.
I mean, people do. They feel like, like a pulsing. You tend to feel it go wherever the block is. As energy is moving, there's like this push through. So not everybody feels that, but quite a few people do in the cleansing journeys.
So where you actually have the coil or the modified coil on the body, you may not necessarily feel the frequencies being delivered, but you might feel the areas in the body where they're starting to have an effect, essentially. And I know many people that have Lyme are also very sensitive, intuitive, kind of tuned in people. So I suspect some people may be able to sense the frequencies as they're kind of coming into the body as well, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you may even feel like we call it a detox sleep, because sometimes as you get a burst of cleansing happening and you get a little bit of a flood of toxins running through your body as it's working on being eliminated, you may just be sitting there one moment, and then 2 to 3 minutes later, you kind of go, and you just almost kind of fall into this detox sleep. And it's what your body knows it needs to do. And so it's kind of exciting when that happens too, because you found a nugget there that when you wake up, you're going to feel the effects of what it's like to not have that as an interference in your system. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, just as we're having this conversation, unless somebody really has strong issues with detoxing, majority of the people that come to us, they're going to have such a positive first or second experience that our clients say to us at our center here, they'll come in and say, this is the time that I look forward to most in my day because I get to reset.
Nourish myself, to take that half hour to step aside. Sometimes in the middle of the day, that feels so decadent to just lay down for a half an hour and put that coil on you. Sometimes I don't get to it to the end of the day when I'm falling asleep, but that's the beautiful part is it's not like you're driving to practitioner's office or to clinics or having to fly places. It's in your home. You can do it on your own schedule, especially working with kids.
Yeah.
For our children, they're not going to sit there, but they can go to sleep and you can place the coil on them. So it's very easy.
Yeah. Our 6-year-old, when she's feeling really off, if she has a flu or something, she goes, Daddy, can I have a session?
They tell us when they need a session now.
Nice.
And that's just the other thing that I think is important to mention is we really, not to take anything away from practitioners and doctors, because a lot of practitioners and doctors have really helped people shift in their health journey. However, when you have something like chronic Lyme or other things similar to this, it's going to take a while to unravel. So we thought it was extremely important to not only make this affordable to where people can make monthly payments on it, that they could do this from home, that it was simple to use as a smartphone, and that just being able to literally have your 6-year-old child figure out how to do it and set up a session and let it do its magic and get on with your day. So it doesn't feel like another burden in your day. You actually have a smile on your face like, oh,
yeah, and
I get to
especially
go
when
and
you're
have the session.
symptomatic, when you need a session, you need it now. You can't wait till your Friday appointment,
Right.
So
how frequently would someone use the device, and then what's the average duration of a session?
Great questions.
average duration of a session is anywhere from about 30 to 60 minutes. Sometimes people might do a little bit more if they're going to run a Herx help, if they tend to have challenges eliminating toxins they kind of prevent from, in preventative mode, so they'll run a Herx help with it. But typically, between 30 and 60 minutes, and usually about 3 times a week.
And you mentioned that once you do the voice analysis, that it will prioritize certain things that need to be supported, and some of them may show 100%. As someone continues to use the device, do they generally see those stressors, that list kind of shrinking and the amount of stress going down as well? Is that kind of a common expectation?
Well, those numbers that you see in the Better Guide, those are not significant levels of significance. Those are levels of priority. So you're always going to have a priority. They're not going to go away. It's just saying, out of all of these, which would be the highest priority at this time?
Okay, got it.
So if they were numbers of significance, that would be diagnostic, and it's not a diagnostic tool, but it helps you prioritize. Where do I begin? Where do I go?
Perfect. Let's talk a little more about detoxification and drainage. So I think that's probably one of the most important things that someone with chronic Lyme needs to do, that comes back to the terrain. Why is the terrain what it is? And often it's because of toxicity. So if we look at the AMP coil, does it then have the ability to help support the liver, the kidneys, the lymphatics? Is it also able to support the body from a drainage perspective as well?
Well, if our body's doing what it's designed to do, it'll do that naturally. So all we need to do is look at what's interfering from its natural, normal function. And that's really what we're doing with the voice analysis, is to identify potential interference, and through bioresonance, create harmony, neutralize, and return our bodies to its normal, natural function. So that is often the byproduct. We haven't done double-blind studies and things like that to make claims, and everybody's body is different. Their lifestyles are different. So, we can't say that for every single person, but when you just look at it from a logical or a theoretical perspective, that's what it's designed to do.
Do you generally suggest, when people are doing the AMP coil, that they continue doing any other types of detoxification or drainage support, take binders, things of that nature?
Great question. We're learning that if people already have long-term issues that make it really challenging for them to detox, there are definitely certain things that we highly recommend that they do first. And if they are in that category, the AMP coil may not be the best tool for them.
Yeah, like for us and for the first year and a half of when we started sharing this with people, nobody ever used binders. You didn't have to do anything else. But we have found even in the last year and a half, more and more people are coming to us with genetic mutations and issues with methylation pathways. And those people have significant issues releasing toxins. And so for that subgroup, we do recommend that you have something as an adjunct to help you eliminate, whether it's a sauna, whether it's a foot bath, whether it's enemas, or if you're working with a doctor that specializes in methylation pathways and they provide you with some types of tinctures or supplements, we definitely recommend that you continue with that if you fall into that category.
Well, and we do offer great support for people to understand if they run up against something that doesn't feel like the right process. We can assist with that, and like also from our standpoint, being able to turn the volume down, so to speak, is one of the ways we can adjust it. Yeah,
you can adjust the volume so it lowers it for people who are electrically sensitive or tend to hurt easily, so that the process goes slower, and so you can customize it from low, medium to high.
How long would you say that it generally takes for someone just starting out with the AMP coil to start to notice some shifts that they're moving in a good direction?
Well, that's a good question. I just got a report this morning, and this would be a relevant time to share this. So again, everybody's different. We don't have a certain claim as far as what the AMP coil does. Our interest is developing something, sharing it with people, and constantly getting feedback from people and statistics, so that we can see exactly what are the effects of bioresonance and PEMF on the human body. Not for a specific disease, but for everybody.
And this data came from the Wellness for Humanity Foundation, which has chosen the AMP coil as one of the things that they wanted to put people through a few month process to track certain biomarkers before and after. And so these are the statistics that
specifically with Lyme, and it says here that this is after 4 months of usage, and these are families that have a minimum of 3 people within their family with Lyme disease, and they've been using the AMP coil a minimum of 3 times a week for 4 months. And they have a weekly tracker system so that these stats are gathered every week and then reported at the end. And here's what there's been a couple different groups. One group reported 90% had a 92 to 96% reduction in symptoms.
Wow.
Another group, 89%, had an 84 to 93% reduction in symptoms. And so they got a little more specific in actually tracking common symptoms. And so specifically here it says 84% reported an increase in energy, 89% an increase in mental clarity, 81% improved digestion, 93% reported reduced pain, 76% reduced anxiety, 72% reduced depression, 87.5% increased performance stamina, 76.4% increased memory, 66% improved academics. So again, a lot of these families have children. And so after 4 months, 66% of them had improved academics. 86% improved relationships. As we know, when we are chronically have things going on, we're not ourselves, and that affects our relationships. So as we start to become our true selves again, 86% reported that there are improvements in their relationships. And after 4 months, 57% of the people were able to return to work.
Wow.
And already after just 4 months, they had not only been able to return to work, but 36% had said they'd already been able to reduce debt in their lives, financial debt.
That's just amazing. Yeah, that's phenomenal to have those statistics and see. I mean, I think you said 93% pain reduction. I mean, that's huge. And the energy. I mean, that's some of the more common things people with Lyme deal with, right? Fatigue, brain fog, pain, sleep issues. So yeah, you can start to see that the body is such an amazing machine or device in and of itself that you don't necessarily have to solve every problem that someone might be dealing with. You just have to be able to move enough of the roadblocks out of the way so that the body then can start to find its balance point again.
Exactly. And again, keep in mind that this happened to be with a sample group of all clients who have Lyme. But this was not a Lyme-specific protocol. This is just bioterrain correction. And so really, again, this applies to everybody, because a lot of us, Lyme or not, we have challenges with energy and mental clarity and pain and all those kinds of things. So we're going to start to continue gathering statistics and just in a much larger sample size with a variety, building it into our app so that all of our users are constantly creating feedback points that we can share with people.
One of the things that some of my mentors, Dr. Klinghardt particularly, but also Dr. Simon Yu, they talk a lot about how parasites can be such a significant issue. And in many people with Lyme, the parasites maybe are even a bigger issue, how the parasites themselves potentially have these other smaller organisms within them. So what are your thoughts on the connection between parasites and Lyme? And is the AMP coil able to support somebody in helping the body to mitigate or deal with those types of parasites?
Yeah. Well, all we know is that people with Lyme, parasites will come up very, very high on their voice analysis, the frequencies associated with parasites. So, we're not medical doctors. Klinghardt has, extensive background in researching all these things. We just know based on a user experience that we see that hand in hand. And so we would definitely support and agree with what he's saying, especially with the fact people with Lyme that spirochetes often go internal in, for example, roundworms. And we were looking at why did the frequencies of roundworms always coming up with Lyme, and then when Klinghardt released that at a recent conference, we're like, well, that makes absolute sense. So he's seeing it from one perspective, we're seeing it from another, but it's actually really saying the same thing. So
another area that is common in people with Lyme is living in a water damaged building and dealing with mold toxicity. And so, there's a couple of things there. There's the idea of needing to detoxify the exposure to the mold toxins and the volatile organic compounds and things that you're exposed to. But then there are some practitioners that deal with mold from a water damaged building that will say that you potentially also develop this colonization in your sinuses and your gut from constantly inhaling these environmental organisms. You mentioned that fungus is a common issue that you see as well. So might it be the case that the AMP coil in supporting people dealing with various fungal overgrowths, that it could be helpful from that perspective also?
Well, yeah, I'll speak to that first off. One of the things that we realize not everybody can get out of a toxic or a mold environment right away, but that is one of the things that we help coach people on, is what environmental things can you change right away so the AMP coil can do its job with a lot more ease and grace in getting you back on the path again. So I'll just use my own example. I lived in an old beach cottage and wasn't aware enough to realize how much mold there was until I went in the basement. And I realized that's when my health journey really started. And so I quickly moved out of that house because it was that bad. And, once I did that, and once we started using the AMP coil, because of how powerful the magnetic field is, and because it can go intracellular, being able to take care of that fungus load was huge. I also started developing every spring severe seasonal allergies. Until about 2 or 3 years ago, I literally would have to go jump in the water whenever I could, or take heavy doses of whatever I could to reduce the symptoms. And all of a sudden, after I finally cleared out the fungus with the AMP coil, that next spring, literally 90% of my symptoms were no longer there, which was huge. I did not know that that was even possible.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and it didn't take very long. And so I thought this was just something I was going to have to deal with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
And I just want to clarify, just so that we're clear that we're not making claims. When Aaron says clear out the fungus, basically what he's referring to is using the associated frequencies of fungus, creating a bioresonant effect. And then what happens from there, we don't exactly know, but all we know is that he's feeling better, and other people report feeling better without that frequency strong in their system. So
can people that are EMF sensitive generally use the AMP coil, and might it even potentially over time, as they optimize their terrain, might it help to make them less sensitive to electromagnetic fields in the environment?
Well, the AMP coil is an electronic device, and it has magnetic frequencies. So there does tend to be a different approach when working with somebody that has electrical sensitivity. So they're going to need to lower the volume on it, for sure. And their sessions are going to be much shorter. And with that, we've found that most people with electrical sensitivity can work with the AMP coil. We've had a few that have not been able to, where they can't even, walk into the room. All cell phones have to be off. They're wearing like little helmet things on their head.
We're talking extreme cases.
Really extreme cases. They can't come to town. Cases. So yeah, we do get extreme cases. They can't be in the room if the AMP coil's on. They can't nothing. So with those, I probably wouldn't recommend the AMP coil. I definitely wouldn't recommend the AMP coil just because it's an electronic device. However, if you just have a sensitivity where, you pick up your cell phone, you go, oh, this doesn't feel right to me, or I need to keep the Wi-Fi off in my house. We've had that sensitivity. We turned the breakers off at night in our house. We had everything hardwired. We lived out of town. So we had significant electromagnetic sensitivity, and that has definitely changed, because you look at, what is the core issue behind that? Again, I'm not a doctor, but the patterns that we have seen with people is severely low mineralization and hydration, electrolyte balance. And then just like the new movie Zapped that came out, you see that commonality of mold and metals are very, very common with people with electrical sensitivity.
So when those things are going on, we become an antenna.
Yeah, imagine being filled with metals in your body. You're a walking antenna, and mold goes crazy. Spirochetes go crazy when they're exposed to EMF. So all of that activity is happening, and it's very real for people. I know some people think, oh, you're crazy. How could you be sensitive to this? But it's a very real experience for electrically magnetic sensitivity.
And in this conversation, there's a misconception that, all EMFs are bad. So there's healthy electromagnetic frequencies. Otherwise, the Earth wouldn't vibrate the way it does. And then there's obviously unhealthy ones that don't allow nature to be nurtured. And so these are the ones, the harmful ones, that most of us are being faced with, especially if we live on the grid, which majority of our population does.
Right. And there's the static and fluctuating frequencies. So the static frequencies are what we're exposed to all around us, and they're within a frequency range that is not biologically identical. So we work within the frequency range up to 10,000 hertz. And otherwise, with Wi-Fi, cell phones, it goes way above or way below. And that's where our body goes, I don't know what to do with this. And it's literally creating a bioresonant effect. Just like when we tune with the AMP coil to what is biologically identical, you're tuning to things that are not. And so your body's getting all confused and disoriented, and your immune system can get scrambled. So,
and I think that's an important point that you just made as well, because I've seen people take healing devices and then go measure them with their EMF meter and say, oh my gosh, this thing puts off EMF. Well, yeah, that's part of what it was intended to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a harmful thing. And if you didn't have magnetism in some way from the Earth, for example, I don't think we would even live for very long.
Right? We wouldn't.
So,
right. Yeah. And usually those meters are called RF meters, and those are measuring the static. We're working with pulsed, fluctuating fields. So you can't even really get an accurate reading of what this is doing with an RF meter.
One of the things that I've observed over the years with some of the healing tools is that animals particularly are really drawn to sit on them, to really enjoy them. And so I'm wondering, have you seen that with the AMP coil as well? Do they sense the beneficial?
Yeah, I'll say with the rare exception, especially dogs, our own dog is 5 years old. And I believe that our dog will probably live twice as long, because she's smart enough that anytime the AMP coil is on, she will come and she will lie there while the session is going on, no matter where she is in the house.
A lot of people send us pictures of them coiling, and you see a dog sitting right next to them, and cats too. We even had a lady the other day say that she has this cat. It's never sat on her lap. It just does not like to be pet. But every time she turns on the AMP coil, that cat will come and sit on her lap. And she's going, oh my gosh, I've never seen this. But it's just very, very drawn to coherent fields.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. What are some of the contraindications for using the AMP coil? For example, if someone has metal implants, whether they have maybe, metal in a hip or a knee, or even dental implants, pacemakers, pregnancy, are there certain people that just should not be using the AMP coil?
Well, you just went through the list.
Yeah, that's the main list. Yeah. I would say any type of electronic implant, we just don't want to take the risk of, because if you put that coil on this computer here, it would completely wipe out the computer. Just like that, it can go. So it's very powerful. And so any kind of implant, we don't want to take the risk of that happening. And like you said, pacemakers, pregnancy.
Well, the metals, I'll give you an example. If there's a steel rod in the body, that's going to be a really strong conductor to the magnetic field. So that could potentially heat up, not that it's going to harm the body, but it just may not be comfortable. So we don't recommend that situation. I've got a metal plate in my ankle. I've never had an issue using it. Do I put it for long periods of time on my ankle? I don't. So keeping it a foot or two away in those situations, I've never been aware of the thousands of people we've worked with having issues with small components of metal in the body.
And what about like amalgams or titanium dental implants? It sounds
putting the AMP coil for a long period of time on those amalgams.
Well, the titanium implants are not an issue. If you have amalgam fillings, our concern is that they could be leaking, because they oftentimes do. So if you're running a metal program, it's literally attracting metal and could dislodge it and cause it to leak more. And so that is a concern. So if you have leaking metal fillings, I definitely would not run any of the metal frequencies. Okay.
So they could use the AMP coil, but they'd want to keep it away from the dental area.
Yeah, I would use it on the lower body and not run the metal journeys until you completely have those removed from your system.
And this is where our coaching comes in as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've heard. The couple of people that I know that are already using the device have had really positive things to say about the experience of interacting with your support team. I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of them as well, and I think your team is just amazing. So that's nice.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're very fortunate. And I want to mention something really quick, and kind of a shout out to our team, because we literally were able to bring in type A personalities in every quadrant of healing and manufacturing and engineering that normally would not work together because of their personality types. But we all got out of our way because we realized the mission that we were on, and that's literally to stop the needless suffering in the world. And so we now really harmonize this team that has been with us since day one, that is really just all about getting out of the way of ourselves.
Yeah, most people
and using our skill.
Most people volunteered for over a year without any pay, and it was because they all had a common cause. The sales team, the acquisitions team, the support team, these are all people who have had AMP coils, had a profound transformation, and then said, I want to be part of the cause. I want to pay this forward and help other people. So it's not just like post a job and bring people in. This is about aligning one's personal mission with the greater mission. And so people feel that when they talk to the support team, they know that it's not just a job for them. patients.
And I think when we align what we do every day with our purpose and passion, that's incredibly healing for ourselves as well, right? I mean,
Big time.
Yeah.
So if people are interested in learning more about the AMP coil, how do they reach out? Tell us a little bit about the cost of the system and what the options are if people want.
Okay. Well, first off, we're fortunate now where we have the technology within a couple hours of almost anybody, at least in the US or Canada. And so we can provide a demo in those situations. And majority of the time, people will, especially if they've had something long-term going on, they'll have some sort of profound effect in the first session or two that will allow them to go, yes, this is a path I want to take, or not. It's going to be very black and white, which is something that they're maybe haven't had up until now. Yeah. So that's one of the beauties there.
And they'd be referred out to an ambassador. So, it's not directly from the company, but people, AMP coil owners who have stepped up and said, wow, I've had a transformation and I really want to represent and help other people. That's what we call our ambassadors. And so they have a little bit extra level of training and knowledge and experience. And we have about 175 currently around the country right now. And so if you call in, we would refer you out to an ambassador in the local area, and you would just work with them directly. And either an initial demo, which you're not going to go, wow, my life is completely transformed in one session, but you'll be able to feel a shift. And that's the important thing, is when you're on this journey, people don't expect to be better overnight, but there's a peace in knowing that you are at least moving forward in the right direction. You'll feel your body go, I feel closer to being at home. And that's what you want to be looking for, is that you're moving in the right direction. If you want to have a few more sessions, or maybe even go through a 10-session cleanse, you can work that out with the ambassador so that you can feel what it feels like to actually start cleansing and make sure that this is right for you.
Yeah, in regards to majority of the people that come to us have been in a challenged financial situation. So we were very fortunate with our previous technology company to have a long relationship with a finance company that just happens to be based in Wisconsin, which may have the highest concentration of Lyme in the country. And so when they knew what we were developing with the AMP coil, they really got on board and said, okay, what can we do to make an attractive plan for these people? And so we were literally able to come up with a plan where people can pay as little as $150 a month, and even interest-free the first year, to get themselves back on track. And since you heard the stats earlier, a lot of these people are able to go back to work in a few months. And we have a wonderful referral program that people get a nice check, or they can put it towards paying off their device by referring others to us. So word of mouth is the majority of our business. And so most of these people that get the technology within a month or two, all of a sudden they're back out in the world and people are noticing how much more vibrant they are, and they're asking what they're doing. Next thing you know, they're giving them a demonstration and they're going, well, I need to have one of these too.
Yeah. So with finance, it's $7,850 for the unit. And so Aaron was saying that can be financed for about $150, sometimes $130 a month, with about a 10% down payment and 0% interest that first year. With that comes the hardware that has the amplifier system, the Tesla coil. You get a brand new tablet that operates the Better Guide. You do your voice analysis with. We do recommend that you only use that tablet for working with the AMP coil if you're not watching movies and doing other things on it, because it could alter the systems. So that, and then you get as much support as you needed with Support Central. We do have a return policy of up to 90 days. There's a restocking fee at 30 days and at 90 days, a different restocking fee. But, we wanted to give people the peace of mind, too, of saying, hey, if this isn't the right fit for you, there are options around that. As long as we can cover, some of our basic costs on that.
And we feel very fortunate that we've only had a few people over the last few years that have decided in that 90 days.
Yeah, I think less than 5 people in 3 years.
That's amazing.
Return, yeah.
Yeah, and I know a big part of that is because of how we support people on their journey. It's not just about the device. And a lot of people come to this and just don't have the awareness of the other things they get to change in their environment to really have success with this.
And it's because it's coming into a community. It's not just Support Central supporting them, it's the whole community, because they're with like-minded, like-hearted people that understand them and can offer tips and solutions and ways of doing things, or ask questions that they never thought of, and so they're continuing their learning and growth too. So that's a big part of it, is also the community. Once you're part of it.
So I wanted to get a few comments from you on the role of mental, emotional health and that whole realm in terms of Lyme and related conditions. How does becoming stuck in our story prevent us from achieving higher ground? And is it sometimes important to really become ready for a new story in order to optimize our progress with this technology or with any tool that we might be using?
Yes.
I'm gonna let Aaron answer that one, because he's usually on the phone a lot with the people first coming in that are really in their story. And
so what I do, because we attempt to develop a relationship with our clients pretty quickly, and they've been on similar paths to us, so we can get, what I say, real with them very quickly. And if someone is stuck in their story, we politely discourage them from getting an AMP coil. And when I say stuck in their story, that they are attached to their so-called dis-ease. And we can usually ask a few questions and know if they are. And if they're able to, say, write a news story, and they're open to that, then we know we're working with someone that shift could happen. And we'll help them beyond 100%.
Yeah.
And it's
because the mind and the emotions are so powerful. Those are also frequencies, and they can actually even be measured. You know, when somebody is in a meditative state, it actually raises your frequencies by 15 megahertz. You know, so a positive thought, a negative thought, all between about 10 and 15 megahertz difference. That's a significant difference in the vibration of your body. So if you're stuck in this low mental, emotional state, that's going to keep your physical body also challenged. And we want to see people succeed, and we want to work with people that want to succeed. So, you know, even if they don't know what their new story is, as long as they're open to having a new reality, then we welcome them in, because we didn't know either. You know, we were in our story too in the beginning. But we were open to saying, you know what? There's got to be a reason why this happened. There's some kind of meaning. There's some kind of benefit that is going to come of all of this. Whether it's just a deepening of my character and strength and will, whether it's I may be able to help other people someday, even if it's just one other person that I can help because of my experience of what I've gone through. If I can touch that one starfish and make a difference, there's meaning. Maybe there was a healing with my children or my husband, and it deepened our love and helped us to understand unconditional love. Maybe it forced me to get out of my old job that was keeping me stuck and not in my true passion in life. It seemed like a catastrophe that I had to quit, but now look at what I'm doing in life. You know, as long as people are open to creating this new story and a new reality and seeing that there is some kind of meaning to this all, and that meaning is really happening for us, not to us. There is this innate sense of goodness and happening things for us. We welcome that.
On a very simple note, a lot of our clients report back to us that they almost feel like the cobwebs in their brain get cleared out. And that allows for the new story to begin, where they didn't think they could even do that before because it was so blocked.
Right, because and lots of times you really don't start to see these shifts until, you know, maybe 30 days, 60 days, something like that, because when people come in, their neurotransmitters are so depleted, you know, parasites, all these different things are robbing us of our minerals, nutrients. You know, we literally have other brain engrams in our system that are causing all this confusion. So most of the time, your mental and emotional state when you're in this condition is not your own. You know, so we don't try to counsel people at all. We never try and counsel people, but when they first come in, it's almost like talking to a drunk person. It's like, go get sober, and then let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing we do. It's like, just push the play button for 30 days, and then let's talk, because their mental, emotional state transforms so much.
The first 30 days is what I call the heavy lifting that we make easy, as long as you follow the program. And so,
which is just pushing play.
Yeah, exactly. And so after that first 30 days, majority of our people are like, okay, now it's just cleaning up the debris around me, which seems manageable. And that's where we're really able to help a system.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, as a result of this, they're realizing that the toxic relationship that they were in no longer serves them, because they can see the forest through the trees and how much that was. You talk about the emotional state, so I'm just bringing that up as a big one.
Yeah. And they stop taking everything so personally, and that judgment on themselves, because they go, wow, that was the parasite stocking, that was my low mineral stocking, that was all these other things, and they start to have some forgiveness around things, because they realize it wasn't just a character defect that was happening.
So I usually wrap up with this last question. And so for you guys, maybe it's besides the AMP coil, what are some of the key things that you do on a daily basis in support of your own health?
I'll start. First off is grounding to the earth in one way or another. I mean, the device can help with that, but literally being out in nature, putting your feet on the earth, whatever that looks like for somebody. For me, it's being in water. I love stand-up paddleboarding. Actually, I'm going to give a quick plug. We have an annual stand-up paddleboarding trip in Lake Tahoe, which is a Lyme to Wellness stand-up paddleboard trip. We do it every summer now to gain awareness and funding to help other Lyme families. So just being out in nature is huge. That's definitely...
Well, and that paddle trip started because Aaron is an avid paddleboarder, and once he started to get his body back,
my life force,
that was in his life force. That was his celebration. His victory lap was to make it 80 miles around Lake Tahoe as that.
That's amazing
celebration. So now it's done annually.
You're coming, aren't you?
That would be fun. Actually, I've always wanted to paddleboard, but I don't know if I'm going to.
Yeah, we'll pull you behind the boat on a paddleboard. How does that sound?
Yeah. So that's a big one. Is that piece. The other things that really come up that a lot of people really take for granted is how much the Wi-Fi around us, because it's everywhere, can really affect, especially like we talked about earlier. So if nothing else, making sure that that's unplugged at night if it's in your environment. So that's definitely another piece. As far as food, I come from a nutrition background, and I think in a realistic world, especially when you start using the AMP coil, an 80-20 rule in eating, where you're eating healthy, conscious food 80% of the time. Staying away from the gluten, the wheat, a lot of the things that are just that you hear about when you're on these journeys, and then other 20% actually being able to live a little, and it actually keeps your, I believe, your mind and body in a place where you're not stressing out going, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have had that.
Yeah. When we were really sick, we didn't have that luxury, that 20% luxury. We had to be extremely rigid, but now, I can have some sourdough bread or, things like that. It doesn't bother me anymore.
So I mean, it's definitely the, conscious eating. It's being aware of your environment, the toxins around us, those types of things. I've just become really, really conscious of, and having healthy relationships, just deciding that, okay, in my new story, I'm only going to be around people that are supporting me in my highest vibration. And I think that's a big one that a lot of people don't really put a lot of emphasis on.
Yeah. I'm pretty similar with Aaron, since the AMP coil has been in my life, it's really simplified self-care. I don't have this list of all these different appointments and all these different things. I have my AMP coil, and then I have the basics. As long as I have good sleep, and I'm sleeping, I'm hydrating, I'm eating well, I have some exercise, I have loving relationships in my life, I'm in a healthy environment, and I'm doing what I love and keeping that spiritual connection.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it. That's what keeps me in balance. And that's really what we're all striving for in the end, what our body, our minds, everything is homeostasis, balance.
This has been really informative, insightful. I want to thank you guys for sharing your frequency and your vibration with us today.
Likewise.
Our pleasure.
The journey that you have both been through with your health, and to see you and get the opportunity recently to meet you in person and just to see how well you're both doing, I think just speaks volumes. And so I appreciate and honor the work that you guys have done to put together a tool that may be helpful for many people dealing with something like chronic Lyme disease, and a new option that can move us to a better place. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really appreciate it. And it was great to talk to both of you.
Thank you, Scott.
Good to be on the journey with you.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye. To learn more about today's guest, visit ampcoil.com. That's ampcoil.com. Thanks for your interest in today's show. If you'd like to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, you can find me there as Better Health Guy. To support the show, please visit betterhealthguy.com/donate. If you'd like to be added to my newsletter, visit betterhealthguy.com/newsletters. And this and other shows can be found on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Thanks for listening to this Better Health Guy blogcast with Scott, your Better Health Guy. To check out additional shows and learn more about Scott's personal journey to better health, please visit betterhealthguy.com.